Right guys, that's it from the village of Kostanjevica. Tomorrow I may just stay and have a rest, put my feet up for a day rather than travel. If not, it will be on to Croatia and another small village where, despite its size, it had an amazing impact on the history of the Balkans. So see you again soon. Hi guys, I'm back in another small village, but this time I'm in Croatia. And the reason I've come here is on my right hand side. Because this village, and in particular this house, was the home of Josip Broz, better known as Tito. And there is a statue of the great man next to it. Let's go and have a look. Now, I'm not going to delve into the history of any of this because it's all has political biases depending on which country you're in at the time. But suffice it to say that Tito, for all his failures, was a war hero. He did fight the Germans, was an extremely brave man. And in my opinion, and I think of many others, as you can see from the flowers that are laid at his statue, that the Yugoslav years are still remembered by quite a lot of people of different nationalities now, obviously, because Yugoslavia broke up. And of all the Eastern Bloc countries, I think Yugoslavia would have been the one to live in because the others were far more repressive. That's not to whitewash the man, of course, and as I say, I'm not going to delve any further into that. But suffice it to say, he's still held in some regard by a lot of particularly older people. Anyway, onward. The village itself, the whole village, is a museum village. So we'll have a wander around, see what we can find. Let's look inside the house first. It's a reasonable sized house. This is the kitchen area. And there's two ovens, one here and one here, which very sensibly are multi-purpose, because if you walk into the bedroom, well, the living room and then the bedroom, I should say, there is the back of the oven with decorative tiles on the outside and then a seat around it, so that people could sit here next to it in the warmth, thereby using every last bit of energy, which is very clever. And then a small bedroom, another bed in the living room, and then a large, what I can only assume was some sort of reception room originally. The upstairs is not available to look at, so presumably more bedrooms up there. And another room to the rear there, so it's a sizable house. This room is filled with pictures of the people Tito met, lots of them of course, including Tricky Dicky, Mr. Nixon, and Fidel below. Yugoslavia was a founder member of the non-aligned movement, so they wouldn't be swayed by East or West during the Cold War, and they tried to have their own line on how the world should be run. So, a brave decision. Now I realise this is a sanitised version now, as it's a museum. And I remember Yugoslavia in the 1970s, and it was pretty crumbly and run down. So it looks absolutely idyllic now, and it is idyllic now. It's a beautiful place. But I would imagine when Tito lived here, things weren't quite as clean or attractive. I would imagine it would have been slightly more run down, but still a lovely place. Have the obligatory mannequins doing various Yugoslav jobs, and a bridal feast laid out, complete with minstrels. Very kitsch, but good. Just below to these drying racks about as well. I've noticed so many now, but it used to be everywhere. Corn on the cob, but I also remember tobacco. Again, back in the 70s and 80s, I remember them drying tobacco in racks, which again I haven't seen for a long time. And the verandas, they used to use the verandas to hang peppers and things on to keep them dry, just in case while they were drying. The village fire station. Look at that for a fire engine. Wow. And on the back wall, sadly lots of glare from the lights, with the brave men of the local service. And outside another one from 1889. And behind it, a set of ladders. And some top-class reeded thatch on these, well, on this building. Most of them are tiled, but this one's thatched. If I give you an idea of scale, just as we're walking along, that's a small house, a small village house, and the one next to it's not much bigger, and then there's Tito's. So Tito's family must have been fairly rich to have afforded a house like that. More corn under the eaves, drying. Fake, I think, but you never know. Now this little house, part of a farm, is actually outside the village. Well, not the village, outside the historic part of the village. And therefore unrenovated, or at least not to the same degree as is the one across the road. Personally, I think they have more charm, but that's probably just me. I haven't seen any wells, so I can only assume the water was drawn from the stream that runs through the middle of the village. But looking at the state of it today, that can't have been very healthy. There must be a well somewhere, I'm sure. The most important part of the village, where they made the booze. I'm assuming rakia, some sort of plum brandy, as that's the most common drink in the Balkans. There are vines around here, so possibly wine, but it doesn't look like wine, it looks more like spirit. So this one says it has a typical interior of the mid-1800s. So it's fairly sparsely decorated. You've got a dining table and some bench chairs on the outside. You have a bread storage container, a rack, some various wooden utensils, and of course your heating from your stove, with a storm lantern as lighting. And then a very small kitchen. Barrel roofed, although barrel roofed, I don't know why. There must be a reason, but I have no idea why. Very small, this one. A few utensils, and then of course your oven. Right, there is a well. I thought that had to be the village pump. And it's round the back of Tito's house, in fact. So he had a very short walk to come and get the water. But that's the only one I've seen. And because it gets very cold up here in the northern part of Croatia, you have your winter transport as well. Horse-drawn sledge. Now this house apparently dates from, well, was constructed and therefore the interior is to match in the mid 20th century, so 1950 or so. And the interior, although there are more things, a lot more things than the house we saw earlier, is still fairly sparse. And the same layout. The only thing that's missing is the oven heating the bedrooms or the living room, as there now appears to be a separate steel stove. But yeah, so the 1950s village life would look like this, when of course Tito was in charge of Yugoslavia. And the 1950s bedroom, which again has little changed. And to be honest, I think the earlier heating arrangement was superior. I'm not sure why it was dropped, because this bedroom is unheated. We're back at Tito's house. The short village tour is done. But I just realised that as well as it being probably the biggest house in the village, looking at the layout of the hedges, the enormous barn next to it also seems to belong to their house. So the Brozzies must have been fairly wealthy to have certainly two of the largest buildings in the place. But anyway, fascinating little village, well worth the effort to come and have a look at if you're in this corner of Croatia. It's north of Zagreb, very, very close to the Slovenian border. Well worth a look.